When have you seen the real world hit a spoiled brat? Story 1. When the high school principal's daughter, who previously got away with all kinds of garbage behavior, vandalism, drinking, major bullying, etc., got caught vandalizing a lecture hall in university, she was unceremoniously dumped and banned. Parents whined for months on Facebook about their poor baby's unfair treatment and the fact that her application to other universities were being denied. Story 2. Simple and pure example for my part. There was only one coffee shop on my campus operating out of the library building, and it was always crowded. You pretty quickly learned that if you wanted coffee before class, you got there 20 minutes early, grabbed a newspaper, I'm old, sue me, and took your time. It was always funny watching incoming freshmen crowd the line 5 minutes before 8 a.m. and slowly filter out in despair as they realized there was absolutely no way they were reaching that sweet Sumatra nirvana in time. Cue this little freshman girl, dressed in the classic campus t-shirt, jean shorts, blonde ponytail coming out of the ball cap, starter pack, walking up, assessing the line, stretching out the door, and boldly deciding to just sorta skip it. Now, the baristas were usually pretty cool with people skipping for simple things, dropping down a quarter for some Scantrons or a buck for a cookie, anything that didn't require interaction. Not this girl. She caught the barista's attention while the previous customer was still paying and went, "Hi, yeah, can I get a latte, please, like really quickly?" The line starts back there," replied the now slightly confused girl behind the counter. She says, "But I have class," whined the freshman. There was an awkward pause before the barista responded, "You are in college, campus. Are you freaking serious? Why do you think all these people are here? Back of the line." "Oh," was the only thing the freshman girl thought to say. As she turned to look at a line full of people staring daggers back at her, she looked not upset or embarrassed, but sort of enraptured by this newfound understanding she's just been imparted with. It's like for the first time in her entire life, she realized that other people were in her way for reasons. It was actually kind of a beautiful thing to watch, like a baby deer learning to walk for the first time. Better late than never. Story 3. One of my favorite things about the military is that in a uniform, nobody can tell how privileged or unprivileged you might have been. It's a total blank slate, and for many, it's humbling to not get to or have to wear your social status on your sleeve. On my second ship, there was an E2 who grew up very wealthy and was an ass about it. He wasn't afraid to let us know. He thought that he was better than his peers. There's a stereotype of the enlisted guy who thinks of himself as an officer as a way to pretend that means anything. That's this guy in every way, and he would try to get out of crap enlisted work because he was going to be an officer, probably even a commanding officer of a ship. So there we are, a few hours into his first deployment, and this freak gets violently seasick, and it lasts for days. I don't know if you've ever been around someone who can't open their eyes without yakking, but it's awful. You feel really bad for them, and it's hard to watch someone go through it. Not with this guy. Story 4. In high school, one guy was a real jerk to everyone. He had no sense of anyone but himself, and everyone kissed his butt because he was not only valedictorian of his class, but also star football, basketball, tennis, and track star. He was the top dog for all the extracurriculars as well. He made my best friend cry multiple times just by being an ass toward her, and she had the unfortunate luck of being in his grade. He was also known as a player, just dating whoever he felt was hot enough for him but would also put out for him. He honestly thought that nothing bad could ever happen to him because he was just that special. He graduated high school and went to his school of choice and immediately came out as gay on social media. Not too long after that, he got his first boyfriend. Before the semester was even finished, his boyfriend cheated on him and he flunked out of his college and ended up having to go to another school. The last time I saw him, he was super polite and seemed to be rather humbled by his experience outside of our tiny town. His family had money too. They weren't insanely rich, but he always wore Abercrombie and Hollister clothes, and he bragged about how he refused to wear anything else. He also made fun of a lot of people who didn't have a lot of money, myself included. I don't know if that ever changed though. Story 5. I was out at a farm with my cousins for a party. It was more like an afternoon barbecue with all the parents sitting, talking, and cooking while the kids ran around playing. Usual lazy afternoon in Africa. So anyway, I was 16 at the time, making me the oldest of the kids, and I will admit that I was all back of the bus / too cool for school type of cringy teenager, and was practicing my casual aloofness. Now, there was this German couple there with this absolute monster of a child, maybe 5 years old, who made it his mission to terrorize all the other kids. The parents of little Adolf sat beaming with delight watching their little ray of sunshine playing with the other kids. Eventually, it became apparent that they were going to do nothing about it, and my parents told me to keep my cool and just ignore him. I did because I didn't want to put my parents in an awkward situation. At some point in the afternoon, the kid found one of those plastic toddler toys. You know, the ones where they can sit on it and push themselves around, but it also has a handle at the back that toddlers can use as a walker. So he finds this toy and is running around this lawn full speed, rhyming all the other kids. Now, I did tell him nicely that it was not good to hurt the other little boys and girls, but he cleanly ignored me and carried on with his game, giggling and chasing the other kids. He also decided that I was now fair game, and I got rammed in the ankles and Achilles tendon a few times, and I'm fuming. His parents were watching and laughing the whole time. Eventually, I am done with this crap, so I position myself in front of this small ditch, only about 1/4 of an inch deep and full of grass, and pull up my phone, pretending to read messages. I was making myself an easy target for the little brat. He comes charging up behind me, aiming for my heels again. The front wheels go into the little ditch, stopping the walker. The kid was pushing it so fast that his momentum carried him right over the handlebars, right over the push toy, and past me, face planting in the dirt, going full scorpion. There was no blood, but he lay there and screamed blue murder. The best part was that the parents watched the whole thing take place, and they and the other parents never suspected that I stood in that exact spot for that exact reason. His parents were kind of pissed that the kid hurt himself while I was watching the kids, but they couldn't say anything, so they just kept the boy close the rest of the day. Story 6. My friend has this entitled younger brother who acts as if the world revolves around him. While his dad is stern with him, his mom babies this behavior and he can get away scot-free with almost anything. He gets angry very easily, and even at the slightest things. I was over at my friend's house, and while we were downstairs, we heard a loud crash from his brother's room. It turns out he was playing Fortnite on his TV and threw the controller into the glass table, which shattered. My friend called me later in the day over Discord and told me how after his dad came back, he grounded his brother for a month, and he wasn't allowed to play video games or go over to a friend's house. He had to pay for a new table with his allowance and had to do chores. He got what he deserved. Story 7. When I was in high school, there was this horribly bratty rich kid who loved to pick on others, push people around, and play the "do you know who my dad is" card a lot. Let's call him Todd. I hated this kid all through school. The final year of high school, I'd had a bad day one day, and it obviously showed. Todd sees me walking in the hall and makes some snide remarks about my shirt. I promptly tell him to shove it as I'm not in the mood. He walks over to me while I'm at my locker and slams my locker door and shoves me. I recall that he said something else, but I honestly don't remember what it was. I just remember that I saw red and I drove my fist into his nose like an A-truck. I stomped away all teenage and angsty-like. I got called to the office the next day. Todd is sitting there with his father and the principal. I knew I was screwed. The principal shows us the security footage of what went down. I'm assuming an expulsion is coming my way when Todd's father puts his hand on my shoulder and smiles. He tells Todd to say thank you, and we both look at him dumbfounded. "Why would I thank him? He broke my nose," says Todd. His father responds with, "Because if I had been there and seen you act like that, I'd have killed you." He stood up and left, and I was excused to return to class. Todd never bothered me again after that. Story 8. Oh goody, I remembered this earlier today and was hoping I'd be able to share it. Not sure if this really qualifies, but it's a good one. So this gem isn't about a child. This was a full-grown woman, maybe mid-30s, who very clearly was handed everything in life. Spoiled, selfish, entitled, whatever you want to call it. She was way out of touch with reality. So I grew up in a very nice upper-middle-class area with nothing but houses for miles around. At the center is a small block with a little grocery store, a few boutiques, restaurants, and a drugstore. It's the only shopping center anywhere around that attracts really snobby people. Anyway, I was maybe 14 or 15 and went to the drugstore to grab something or another and happened to wander past the makeup aisle. This drugstore is pretty large, so their makeup selection is huge, with every brand you can think of taking up one whole wall of the building. I had just rounded the corner where I saw this woman sitting on the ground just as I saw the manager coming around the opposite corner making a beeline for her like a bulldog. He stops, arms crossed, and the following happens. Him. "Ma'am, I know you know that you have to pay for those." Her. "What?" Him. "The makeup. All those packages you've opened, you have to pay for them." He gestured toward where I was standing, still at the end of the aisle. I looked down to my right and saw what he was pointing at. The pressed powder compacts. She had opened one of each shade, ranging from ivory to warm beige, and left the remains in piles at the bottom of each display. "That's right," I said, "each one." She went through every single brand and opened the packaged compacts, and to make worse, each brand usually makes more than one type of pressed powder. There had been at least 40 of them. Her, agitated. What do you mean? I don't understand. Why do I have to pay for them when I only need one? Him, about to have a stroke. Because you've destroyed them and because you've used them. We can no longer sell these to anyone else because they've been contaminated by you. Her, becoming irate now. Well, I needed to test them to match my skin tone. It was at this point I realized that next to all the compacts were the used makeup sponges that come with them as well as what appeared to be used baby wipes. Him, with an impending aneurysm. Well, I hope it was worth all the money you now owe us. This was about 15 years ago, so the remainder of the conversation is still a little fuzzy. I know she was panic crying and was refusing to pay and he threatened to call the cops. But I had to leave at that point, so I didn't get to see the outcome. But I do know that I did a little math when I got home. Nowadays, one of those compacts will cost about $10 each. But back then, I'd say maybe $5 or $6, so she had to pay at least $240 at the end of all that. Story 9. My dad owns a bar, and one night there was this rich kid with his friends, boat shoes without socks, the whole thing. He was giving one of the bartenders a tough time because he was on the shorter side. This kid was bothering the bartender for about half an hour until finally he got my dad to come out. My dad basically yelled at the kid about how the bartender enlisted in the military and fought in Afghanistan and how ashamed he should be to make fun of an honest, hard-working veteran for his height. The kid left the bar nearly crying, and I hope that experience helped him change for the better. Story 10. I will admit that I was a bit spoiled growing up, though I didn't think I was a brat. My mom had a maid that came in several times a week. When I went to college, several things were very different for me. I knew to clean up after myself, but cleaning a bathroom was completely new. The biggest shock was laundry. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing or how. I knew I was supposed to use detergent and softener, but I thought any soap would do and didn't know what softener was. I had no idea how or when to add them either. Reality hit when a campus security guard came in and I asked how much dish soap I was supposed to use, and the man started laughing. He did help me get the right soap after and explain how to operate a washer and a dryer. Story 11. In the 6th grade, my teacher was this tough, older Scottish woman with a very thick accent who probably led battalions in World War II. She terrified me and I adored her. One of my classmates was this snotty brat who constantly bragged that she never had to do chores or homework and always got her parents to do her work for her. One day, we had a book report due. The book report was supposed to be 2 pages long, and for some reason, this girl wasn't able to get her parents to do her work for her on this one occasion. She came in and turned in a book report only 1 sentence long. Our teacher looked like she was about to rip this girl in half. She held up the book report and said loud enough for the entire class to hear, "Are you an idiot?" Story 12. When I was working at a public library, we had few local celebrities come in from time to time. Most of them were nice, but one had a real stick up his ass. He would whine about having to stand in line, about late fees, and about everything else. We would just say, "Sorry, those are the rules," or "Thank you for being patient," even though he wasn't. One day, he and I were apparently both having a bad day, and when I told him there was a limit on how many DVDs or video games he could check out at a time, he slammed his hands on the desk and raged, "Do you know who I am? This is a grown-ass man, mind you, and I was a little college student who barely looked old enough to drive. I was sick of his low-key bullying, so I just looked at him and said, 'Yes, I do, Mr. X, and the rules still apply to you. Which of these would you like me to put back?' He was stunned, and I don't think anyone had ever actually told him that the rules for everyone else did in fact apply to him as well. He was a little nicer after that. Not a lot nicer, but still. Story 13. When my brother was in school, he was horrifically bullied for being autistic, and his bully was the most entitled little kid I'd ever had the displeasure of meeting. His father paid for boxing practice, karate lessons, and other martial arts, and this made him think that he was the best at anything physical. Now, my brother isn't overly fond of sports and prefers to read in the library. As a typical nerdy kid, he's a prime target for bullies. One day, when the bully had cornered my brother up against a wall, my brother finally decided that he just wasn't going to take it anymore, but he strongly dislikes violence and thus would not be fighting back. Instead, when the bully tried to punch him, my brother ducked. 3 broken fingers and a trip to the hospital later, the bully's father finds out what had been happening. All his extra classes and trainings were canceled, he had all of his electronics and games sold, and if he wanted to have a car, he'd have to work for every penny himself. Story 14. Spending $50 on food a day is not normal. A college girl got cut off from her parents, drinking and not going to class, and had to get a job. She put on Facebook about how she's going to go hungry and needs money. People offered her food and made her dinner. She said, "That's okay. I just need about $40 to get through the day. I don't like to grocery shop." Note, $40 can feed you for a week if you grocery shop. Story 15. I was a school bus driver in the 70s. During the height of court-ordered busing, I ferried poor kids to the rich side of town, then rich kids the other way. Lots of entitled brats, but one stands out. A super entitled kid constantly defying rules. Eventually, I caught him, with too many witnesses, attempting to set a bus seat on fire with his lighter. School officials were called. Hearing with officials and rich dad, and he's banned from all buses for the rest of the semester. Dad offers to pay for the damage and quietly accepts the punishment. Then comes the surprise. The next morning, when I arrive at 6 a.m. to clean my bus, a regular task every morning, a rich kid and Dad are standing there. Dad introduces me to my new personal bus cleaner for the rest of the year. He brings the kid every morning and forces him to wash and clean the floors on my bus before taking him on to his school. By the end of the year, the entitled kid is actually working hard and being friendly. We're getting along pretty well, and I help him out sometimes so he can go on to school. The kid turns out okay when all this is over. Good move by his dad. Story 16. A kid in college was a roommate of a friend of mine. He was always bratty and spoiled, but hung out with us as if we were a good friend and we let him chill with us because sometimes he just wasn't that bad. Then one day we heard him arguing with his mom on the phone that he needed more money. From the ensuing argument, we learned that he had, in less than 1 year, burned through the $30,000 that his parents gave him for food and discretionary spending. Mind you, he was not paying for tuition, lodging, or his car with this money. It was basically just food money, as all those other things were already covered by his parents. He was calling his mother some really nasty things and hung up on her. Then his father called and they got into an argument, cussing each other out. At the end of that call, he threw his iPhone at the wall and shattered it. This was the original iPhone. Turns out they cut him off and basically he had to drop out of school and drive back home, out of state, because he couldn't afford to do anything anymore and of course was too good to work a plebes job. He added me on Facebook about a year later and was a late-blooming 9/11 truther. Obama was president by this time, and the only thing I ever said to him on FB was a simple reply correcting one fact he was wrong about in his 9/11 conspiracy theory. He then posted 4 replies in quick succession telling me to open my eyes and then blocked me. Story 17. I worked with a girl who was completely entitled to everything. She was a pretty blonde girl who was reaching her 40s and not so pretty anymore. She was impossible to be around and to talk to. She was always right, had no clue how the real world worked, and always made excuses. I treated her like anyone else I worked with and would not do her work for her. She went to our boss weekly because I was treating her unfairly because I refused to do her work after I got mine done, while she painted her nails and made personal phone calls. She was furious when I got promoted over her. Then we hit the recession of 2008 and I was laid off. She got my job and quit within 3 weeks because she could not handle the pressure. I wonder where she is now and if she's going through the bar circuit trying to find some loser to pay her rent for the month. She bragged about it once doing this and was pissed off when a month came around when she had to pay her own rent. Story 18. We hosted an exchange student when I was 9. Her name was Yuki and she was just so spoiled. She shared my room and she threw her stuff all over the place. In Japan, she had people, dare I say, servants, pick up everything for her. At one point, she had gotten into my makeup. I was 9, so I didn't wear it often, but it was expensive and I wanted to save it and used it without my consent. I was pissed. I demanded that she clean up her stuff. I handed her a broom and she didn't know how to sweep. She had never swept in her life. So she had a meltdown. She was 17 and wrote an angry letter on her laptop that my parents found while I was at school. I don't know what the letter was about, but I know it was bad. She got transferred to another host family. Story 19. This is a good one. For me, it was when my bratty, spoiled stepchild found out she was pregnant. When you have a child, your life stops and the child is all that matters. It hit too hard for her. I love my grandson, but damn, that was fun to watch.